Okay. I don't know. Honestly, I'm really exhausted with this whole debate stuff. It just finished a few hours ago, so this is still my pretty fresh opinions on it. And overall, I think it's pretty fair to say that neither side did incredibly well or incredibly badly. I don't think that you're really going to have a radically different view on either candidate now compared to what you would have had prior to this debate. Trump is such a well known and notable personality that I really think it's hard for anyone really to change their minds too much on him at this point. Biden is a bit more up in the air. He's, of course, incredibly well known, but I think it's a bit more like that there will be people who are a bit unsure with how they stand on him. With all that said, I think Trump did really poorly in this debate. That's not even to say that he lost per se. I think the win lose dichotomy in debates is often not really helpful. The point is, going into this debate, there was the expectation that Joe Biden was going to do really poorly and that he was going to have one of his famous brain farts that he's been having constantly. There were a couple moments when he was stammering over his words, and there was one moment in particular where he seemed to be giving an answer to the economy to a question that was about the current world crisis. But none of them were too egregious. None of them were really obvious, like a lot of the interviews he's done, where he's obviously just doesn't know what's going on. So he did pretty well on that front. And I don't think if you really weren't looking for it, you would have really even noticed any of those relatively small stammerings that he had. So Trump sent expectations really low for Biden. He was talking up a lot of how crazy Biden is and how he just can't handle being president. He won't be able to handle doing a 90-minute debate. And Biden was able to very narrowly beat those expectations. So that is on Trump for setting those expectations so low to begin with. But even further than that, the biggest issue that Donald Trump is having right now is that he's really just not doing very well in the polls. And I know I'm going to get all sorts of people saying, oh, the polls don't matter. Remember 2016, remember Brexit. This is really just exhausting, to be honest. I follow the polls and the elections in many Western countries, and I can say that the vast majority of the times, they tend to be pretty accurate. Are there notable exceptions? Yeah, obviously, even just beyond those two most obvious notable exceptions. But most of the time, they tend to be pretty accurate, and just counting on them being wrong is not a safe position to be in. Now, could they be wrong? Yeah, they could be. I hope they are. And maybe there's a big enthusiasm gap in this election because lots of people are hyped up to vote for Trump and not many people are hyped up to vote for Biden, and that isn't being reflected in the polls very well. That all could be true, but that also really easily could not be true, and it's not a good position to be in where those are the types of things we have to rely on. So when I say that Trump didn't do very well in this debate, I'm not saying that he didn't win in some sort of objective sense. I think he probably did win, if that phrase even means anything in a debate, in some sort of debate club sense. What I mean when I say Trump didn't do very well is that he failed to really focus in on the things that were necessary and that could actually help him a bit and get him a bit closer to getting reelected. The biggest problem, really, I think, was him just constantly interrupting Joe Biden. This happened throughout the entire debate. Anyone that has watched it knows what I'm talking about. He just kept on interrupting him again and again and again. Now, Joe Biden did do the same thing too. I'm not saying it was all one way, but Trump did it way more than Biden did. And it was really noticeable. But okay, why is that even a bad thing? Because I've been talking with a few people and they're like, oh, well, that's alpha, that's based, that's epic. Trump is dominating Joe Biden. And okay, yeah, maybe that seems the way to right-wing people on Discord, that Trump is being epic and based and dominating. But what you need to think about is how is a normal person going to look at this? Normal people aren't going to spend a lot of time dissecting this. Normal people aren't going to pay too much attention to the debate. Normal people, they're just going to get a few key takeaways. And any normal person's key takeaway from this debate was that Trump just couldn't stop talking. Whenever anything tried to happen, Trump would just talk over everyone. Is that really the greatest takeaway? Is that really what we want? Is for people to be focusing on how much Trump was interrupting people? Because that certainly doesn't do anything to dissuade the far left from voting for Joe Biden. That's just going to annoy them more and help them unite around how much both moderate left-wingers and more radical left-wingers hate Trump. And that's what's so annoying about this, because Trump did have some really good points that he was trying to make. In particular, he said several times throughout this debate, after he tried to box Biden in on a certain point, he would say, "You just lost the far left." What Trump was quite clearly trying to do was put Biden in a position where he had to choose between a moderate and a radical left-wing position and isolate one of the two sides of his base. This, I think, was a really good tactic from Trump and something that could actually help him win. The issue with that is it's totally overshadowed by his constant interrupting of Joe Biden. Because what you need to realize, I know anyone watching this is probably the type of person that spends way too much time thinking about politics, but what you need to realize is most normal people don't spend tons of time thinking about this. They just have a few key takeaways, and that interrupting is going to be their main one, and they're going to have less time to think about that conflict between the two ends of Biden's base. And because they're constantly bickering over whose time it was to talk, that brought a lot of attention away from Trump trying to highlight those contradictions. Now, I'm not saying it was all bad. Trump did finally really manage to make that point land later on in the debate on the Green New Deal. In particular, I've seen this trending on Twitter now. Biden said, "The Green New Deal is not my plan," and that was a really great thing to get him to say. That's something that I know will really annoy a lot of people on the more progressive side of his base. So that was really good, but even there, one big problem with it is that was much later in the debate. That's when a lot more people aren't paying attention, maybe not even watching it at all. And their minds are already made up. They're already focusing on what Trump has been doing for most of the debate prior to that. So it was a really good point. He did land it really well. Another really good angle that Trump focused on quite a bit was the corruption with Hunter Biden, Joe Biden's son. This is one thing where he really was really on point, and the only issue again was that it was later in the debate when people probably weren't paying as much attention. He just kept on coming back to specific numbers. I can't even really remember what it was, but it was like $10 million from the mayor of St. Petersburg or something like that, and several $100,000 a month for when he was working at Burisma. The specifics of those numbers don't really matter, but the fact that he just kept on repeating them, I think, was pretty effective at making you remember it. Other than that, Trump did also make some other good points that were delivered relatively well. The stuff about the civil unrest that's been going on in America was relatively good. But again, the issue with that is he was making somewhat decent points, and his overall argument was that the only reason it's as bad as it is Democrat governors, and Joe Biden will just allow it to get worse and worse if he was in charge. I think Trump was able to communicate that point relatively effectively, but again, and I'm sure it's exhausting to hear me just make the same point again and again, but it really was overshadowed by the fact of Trump constantly interrupting. It's just that's all I was able to think about the whole debate. I don't know, maybe I'm just too obsessed with it. I'm not saying that Trump should have been 100% entirely cordial throughout the entire discussion. I think a bit of interrupting would have been somewhat effective. Because, as I mentioned earlier, one of the big goals we wanted out of this, if you want Trump to win, is for Joe Biden to have some sort of big mental gaffe on stage. Interrupting Biden may have been something that could have pushed him a little bit towards that, but it was at a point where Biden was talking so little that he didn't really have the opportunity to mess up the way he has many times in interviews. However, in this debate, it seemed like it was the times when Biden was talking interrupted when he was the most confused, not when Trump was constantly interrupting him. The moderator was helping Biden out quite a bit throughout the debate, especially because of Trump's constant interruptions. He was telling Trump to knock it off. But the thing is, complaining about the media being left-wing, even a host from Fox News, is really just kind of pointless. I'm complaining about Trump because I expect that Trump can do better. I don't expect the media to stop being left-wing. I don't complain to the mainstream media because they don't care about my complaints. And, of course, Donald Trump doesn't care about one random YouTuber. But at least Donald Trump should care about the complaints that right-wingers have with his performance in debates. Because my goal here is that I do want Donald Trump to win. If I was an American in a swing state, I would vote for him. Even though I really doubt his effectiveness, even though I really doubt that there'll be much that he'll really do, he will do some things, probably, maybe, and he's better than a lot of other Western conservative parties are, so I would still vote for him, for sure. There's really no doubt in me about that now, though I would not vote for similar parties like the Conservative Party in the UK or here in Canada. So I'm only giving Trump such a hard time here because I know he can do better, and I want him to do better because I really want him to win. And Trump and the Trump campaign need to recognize the epidemic levels of bias from the media, from the institutions, from all those things, and they need to plan around it. There's no point in just complaining and saying, oh, they were biased, because we know that's how it is. We know that's the reality that we live in. Complaining about it doesn't really do anything. Thanks for watching. Please donate to my Subscribe Star if you enjoy this content, and like, comment, subscribe, hit the bell, and share these videos with anyone who you think might find them interesting. And a special thanks to my donors, Emmett Vestry, yourself, Cepheus Rex, Hexorius, Adzutko, Josiah, King of Evil Florida and the Moon, Seth Apex, Lita, Richard, Charismatic Byzantine, and Quo Pregranator. Thanks for watching, and goodbye.